The idol of the Odeons was how they described Dirk Bogarde. Handsome, charming and stylish. In Britain of the mid-50s, he was the nation's biggest box office draw, his popularity outstripping that of any star from Hollywood. Under contract with the Rank organisation, he started out playing villains in films like The Blue Lamp. But his star soared after he was cast as Dr. Simon Sparrow in the hugely successful Doctor series, and from that moment on, pin-up status was assured. In the early 60s, Bogarde had just left Rank, and he went to Hollywood to play the composer Franz Liszt in Song Without End. The film was not a success, but the role earned him a Golden Globe nomination, and it's the starting point for this conversation with Robert Robinson from the programme Picture Parade.
You're one of the few English screen actors who command attention in America, command real attention, which is underwritten with real money. And I wonder what it is, over and above your capacity to act, which singles a person out for that kind of attention.
I don't know. You said international stardom. Well, I don't know what that means. I'm not an international star yet.
No, command attention in America.
Oh, command attention.
With that in view, I suppose, with the
I don't really know what you mean, though, Robert, because I've only done 2 films in America. One they wanted me desperately for because they couldn't get anybody else.
I'm sure you're being
well, they wanted a special
there.
type. No, they wanted a special type of actor, which had to be an actor sort of known in Europe, the Commonwealth, for that market, and who spoke English with an English unaccented accent for Liszt, you know, because they didn't think it would be acceptable if he came from Milwaukee.
But they could have picked almost anyone for that. Yet they picked you. I think what I'm really referring to is the quality of watchableness which allows an actor to walk into a room and read the telephone directory, and somehow it's exciting, just that. It's this quality that I'd be interested to ask you about.
I'd be awfully interested if you would tell me what it was, because I know exactly what you mean. I have the same compulsion myself when I see somebody on a screen or in the theatre. I don't know why I'm looking at them very often. I suppose it's this extraordinary and ill-used and much overworked phrase, star quality, which I don't believe anybody's ever been able to define. I know that when I was in Hollywood, I was absolutely amazed to see how many of the great and lasting stars were in fact not frightfully handsome people or beautiful women, but had quite qualities of ordinariness. Now, maybe it's something to do with that quality of ordinariness, of high sophistication, if you can call it, because that means high simplicity, doesn't it, sophistication? Or have I got that quite wrong?
Well, I think it's a quality of relaxedness, perhaps.
And something to do, too, with sureness and, I suppose, sincerity.
For a film actor, you live a rather retired and private life. We seldom read of you in the show columns. Is this, do you avoid publicity? Is it distasteful to you?
No. I don't avoid publicity. That makes it sound like something really horrid and unpleasant. I don't think publicity is always necessary. I think sometimes publicity is ugly, and I think it's vulgar, and I think then you should avoid it. And I think sometimes it's wiser perhaps to leave it all alone than to dabble with a little of it. I think that to publicise your film is absolutely splendid. You should go to a premiere if you have to. I don't like it because I don't like crowds. And you should go and talk about it to the press if they wish to see you. And you should speak to you on Picture Parade, as we're doing now. But I don't think it's of any concern to anybody but me whether I take my dogs for a walk on my head or my hat or in a basket, or what I have for breakfast or how I go to bed.
You must teach some of your colleagues.
I know, but that is the trouble, because there are other people who absolutely love everybody knowing exactly what they do with their dogs and where they go for a walk and how they do it. We can't all be exactly the same. It'd be a very dull world if we were. I was always brought up, which sounds very pompous, I can't help it, to, you know, that old saying, little boys should be seen and not heard. It was very deeply drilled into me as a child, and indeed to all my brothers and sisters, and I'm afraid it kind of sticks. I can't put it any better than that.
Do you think, though, that the public should, do you think there's anything against the public getting to know the actual man behind the illusion which appears on the screen?
It's a terribly tough one to answer, you know, that one, because I don't agree, anyway, and I'm quite alone on this. I think that the excitement of the cinema and the theatre is its quality of illusion, of magic, of not quite of this world. And I think that if you know that your favourite actor's bald, or that he's got spots, or he's shorter than you were, you know, the illusion's gone.
But if it's a good illusion, it wouldn't depend on
Not
you
always
knowing
a good
about the
illusion.
mechanics, would you?
Oh, no,
Would
no.
it?
I think it's a great mistake to know about the mechanics.
And yet you know your fellow film actors very well, and I imagine this doesn't spoil your enjoyment of the films they make.
It's a tricky one, isn't it, really? I think in a way, truly it does. Not destroy it, but I think it does harm it a little, my enjoyment of their work. I remember with Kay Kendall, who was one of my greatest and dearest friends, I was never absolutely convinced that Kate, I was never quite satisfied, which sounds conceited and impertinent, but you understand what I mean. I was never quite satisfied that Kate had done the best possible job in a film, because I knew her far too well. I knew every trick, every mood, and I was able, therefore, not always to see the work that she really was doing. So it did kind of, familiarity did kind of blunt the brilliance of her work for me a little.
You do little stage work now, and I think I read somewhere that on the last 3 occasions you appeared in the theatre, you became ill, and that as a consequence you decided that you do no more stage work. Is this resolution holding good?
Yes, it is. It's a great temptation. I made everybody promise faith that if I ever looked as I was moving towards the stage door, they had to shoot me. The thing about it really was that I'd been off the stage for far too long, and too long a gap. I mean, to be off the stage for sort of 3 years and do, say, 12 pictures, which is what I easily have been doing, 3 a year, or 9 pictures, whatever it is, my mathematics. It's too long a time to go suddenly straight into a play with all the intensity and the work and the necessary emotion. You're tired before you start. Then you've got to go on tour and kick the play into shape, and it's a tremendous concentration. And if you are a bit run down at the time, you know, you're liable to pick up a bug, and then you get this panic, oh, gosh, if I'm off, you know, what'll happen. So it's not worth it. I must confess, too, I am appalled at the length of time a play has to run. I think this year's run, or you know, more, is absolutely appalling.
But isn't this part of an actor's, the rub of the green for an actor?
It is, but you're not talking to one of the great dedicated actors. It is indeed part of an actor's trade, but I don't think it's ever a part of an actor's trade to play one part without any break or any relief for over a year or more. I think this is absolutely insane. I think to do what Peter Hall is doing now with Stratford, switching over to the Aldrich, is terribly exciting. And the actors get a rest, they get a break in between, they can prepare the next production, and they're amused always because they're constantly being entertained themselves by the newness of the part. But to stamp on night after night in My Fair Lady, I don't know how anybody ever does it.
You've been successful for a long time. Now, apart from talent, has luck played a part in it as well as talent?
Yes, I think luck plays a tremendous amount in everybody's life, but particularly in our life, in the movies. It's a sort of mixture of all the things, but it's being in the right place at the right time. Maybe even a silly thing as meeting the right man at the right party. You know, he suddenly says, my God, you're just what I wanted, why didn't I think of you? Luck has a tremendous part of our job. I mean, you can plan it all ahead very carefully, and say, I'll do this kind of picture and then that kind, and vary the roles. But at the end of it all, you know, there's this awful element of luck which still comes in.
A few months after that interview came the release of a film that arguably changed Bogarde's career forever. Victim. I played Bogarde's wife. It was directed by Basil Dearden and the first movie to ever use the word homosexual. Many now say Victim helped change attitudes to homosexuality in Britain. Bogarde's part was a sympathetic gay character, a successful married barrister who risked his career fighting a ring of blackmailers. Here he talks to Barry Norman about what drove him to tackle such a controversial role.
I thought, well, there's a point of statement that you can make in the cinema, and you might as well use the cinema to make a statement as opposed to just flopping around with the, you know, left profile for every shot and your hair permed and your teeth capped, and it was self-disgust, I think. I was too old, you see, really. I didn't start at 18, I started at 27.
Yes, you've always looked very young, of course.
Well, fortunately, that's been the family.
But then you were what, to about 40 playing 30-year-olds, and that was...
I was about 40, 41. I was always playing 30. And they say, well, you can get away with 25, which made me even feel more disgusted, you know. Then all these little kids writing letters saying, we love you, want to marry you. Whereas I was sort of a pop singer. Well, anyway, all that was beginning to change, and I decided the wind of change was coming with this pop thing. And when Bill Haley started to come in, I realised that the film stars were going to go out.
Yes.
So at least I was absolutely right on that score.
Yes, indeed you were.
And I cleared off into the right kind of movies before the bottom fell out of popular cinema. Because all the fan adoration that I'd had for years and years and years from little girls and teeny boppers, you call them, and things like that now, and the people like Maggie Lockwood and Stuart Granger had before me, they disappeared. They went into a sort of mist after Four Little Boys from Liverpool, called the Beatles.
But by that time...
That time I cleared.
Yes, because you'd made Victim by then.
Yeah, I'd made all the Nocifers, yeah.
And Victim, of course, was a considerable breakthrough as a film.
It was a big breakthrough as a film. It's a very brave film. It's something that Basil Dearden's never been respected or rewarded sufficiently for. When Basil died and he got that obituary, I was so ashamed that they didn't bother to say he actually altered the course of English cinema, as much as Losey did.
Because it was the first film actually to take homosexuality as a serious subject, wasn't it?
Yes, it was the first film to take it serious as a subject and present it as a serious subject, to present it as a problem that was solvable and that everybody had. You know, it wasn't sort of like having some dreadful unknown disease. Lots of people had it. It was a reasonable thing to have.
You can't hope to keep this out of the press. It's not as though you can go into court as Mr. X. You're too well known.
I don't want to. I believe that if I go into court as myself, I can draw attention to the fault in the existing law.
Knowing it'll destroy you utterly.
Yes.
We're going to need each other very much, aren't we?
No. I'm going to go through this alone. I don't want you here when it happens. I started this thing. I've hurt you terribly, I know that. But I can just get through it to the end if you're not here to face the final humiliations. They're going to call me filthy names. My friends are going to lower their eyes, and my enemies say they always guessed. I don't want you a part of that Roman holiday.
But it was particularly bold for you, I would have thought, because you had this sort of following of little girls, and then to appear in a film as a homosexual,
They didn't mind me being homosexual at all, because, you know, most people think that being queer means that you've got flu. They didn't know anything about that at all. I didn't bother them. What did bother them very much was, anyway, it was all beginning to break away, that pop thing. As I said, because the kids were coming in, a new form of adoration was coming in through the pop singers and through rock and roll and through music. But what they did get upset because I had grey temples. I was playing a 45-year-old man when I was only 40, and that really bugged them frightfully. So I thought, well, now here it comes. I've got the lines here and all the wrinkles coming in here and the makeup going on, the white temples stuck in. They got a bit leery because I was too old. And when they wrote and said, "You're older than my dad," I knew that I was out.
Was Bogarde homosexual himself? He always denied it. From the 1960s onwards, he lived with Tony Forward, a man he always described as his partner and manager, and he insisted the relationship was platonic. After Victim, Bogarde never had a conventional leading man role again, which he considered a blessing. From that point on, he'd appear in more challenging films, winning Best Actor BAFTAs in two seminal 60s movies, The Servant and Darling. Here he is discussing the change in direction in an interview from 1967.
I never was a romantic type, you know. It was a great, great mistake. I was a character actor who got diverted at a time of national drought just after the war, and I fitted somebody else's pants and played their part. That's literally how it started. I was lucky in having a good left profile. I noticed at the moment I'm being shot on my right, which is quite the worst one. That doesn't matter anymore. But this side was very good, and they built all the sets at Pinewood for this profile only. I was like Loretta Young. Nobody ever saw my right side.
At what stage did you decide that you didn't want to play romantic leads anymore?
I did a film some years ago, which nobody's ever seen, called A Doctor's Dilemma by George Bernard Shaw, with Leslie Caron and Cecil Beaton doing the costumes, and a wonderful part, and a super scriptwriter, and a wonderful director called Asquith. The scriptwriter, of course, was Bernard Shaw. And the director was Mr. Asquith. And it suddenly dawned on me that movies had something more to say than just oh, you know, frolicking songs in Spain and all the stuff I've been doing before, and funny pictures like The Doctors, which had great value, but were not satisfying. They were only extensions of myself, and I wasn't actually doing the job that I'd started out to do. And when I found you could really speak good dialogue on the screen and it sounded good, I decided a break had to be made.
Were there any satisfactions from working on the Rank films?
Oh yes, of course there were. The first Doctor was one of the most satisfying things I've ever done, I think, because more people went to hospital after that because they were less frightened. I'm not being sarcastic, because they were less frightened of hospitals than ever before. And people used to come both to Kenny and Kenny Moore, and sort of thank us rather than, you know, laugh at us. They were thanking us for making it easy to get Granny into hospital or a child into hospital. I was recently in a hospital myself for various reasons of my own, and the child, you know, care doctor was called Dr. Simon Sparrow. And they used to stick that on the door, which made the kids feel better. That's all gone now. And the films, I think, are possibly gone too.
Do you do much research when you're preparing a film into the background, the type of job a character does?
Not if it's
Technical
about
things?
people, no, there's no need to. I know, you know, 7.5 or 7 years of the army and 4 to 6 years of living with people. I think it taught me a good deal about people. Research, I certainly do on odd things. If I had to do something particular, I could drive a special kind of car, I'd certainly do that.
Mm-hmm.
Research on a specialized subject, certainly, without any question.
Do you have technical advice at all on set?
Always, if it's needed, of course. In all the Doctors, I had a doctor on the set every day, always, because I never touched a thing that a doctor would touch unless I knew exactly how to use it. Because Dr. Simon Sparrow in the Doctor films was the only straight guy in the pictures. And an audience had to absolutely believe that he was right and safe and secure and good for them. And then all the other people could, you know, could be funny around it. But he never made a mistake as a doctor. Basically, as I always had a doctor there to tell me what to do or what not to do. Although one doctor did allow me by taking out an appendix on the left-hand side. Still, they do that, I believe.
A year after that interview, Bogarde moved, with Tony Forward, abroad to France, and there began a new phase in his career, with acclaimed performances and artistic films like Visconti's Death in Venice, seeing him become a major star of European cinema. Bogarde always put his success down to the fact he was continuously pushing himself. He never lost the feeling that there was more to be learned about acting, as he told the programme Omnibus.
One day we were changing magazines and I looked up and there was the camera operator, Bob Thompson, leaning over the top of the camera. And he was quite short and he had glasses and he was very experienced and he was very nice. And I was just standing waiting and I said, "Hi, Bob. You look very worried. What do you think about?" He said, "Well, I'm just thinking, I don't know how the hell you stuck." Oh, I thought, that's not quite what I meant. So I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, you know a bloody thing about this business, do you?" Now, I'd been in it for 5 years. So I said, "Well, what don't I know?" He said, "It'd take too long to tell you." And I said, "Will you tell me?" And so Bob Thompson told me. He told me how the film went through the gate. He told me how the boom went. He told me where the lights were. He told me about a 2K, an inky dink. He told me every damn thing I had to know about the movies. My own technicians, mine, my mates, not my directors, because they didn't know. I never found an English director that did.
You're an actor who, I think you've said, doesn't require an audience in the strict sense.
Oh, no, God forbid, no.
That, in a way, cinema is a much more preferable medium for you.
Well, cinema is much more exciting because I've said before, it's something you're making technically together. And the thing I have emphasized very strongly in my last book, as you know, is that most actors do not realize that that little beast and that little beast photograph your mind. And if there is nothing in your mind at the time that that is working or that is working, then no one is at home, and you can just as well play pussy. It doesn't matter.
How do you mean photograph your mind?
It photographs thought.
Thought.
The camera is capable of photographing thought. The best example of all, apart from me, because I've suddenly discovered that I do have some kind of thought in the end,
is Marilyn, who had no thought whatsoever in her mind, but she had. Way down there at the bottom, Miss Munro was quite, well, I mean, she has become the legend of the century, almost. And the camera found what she was doing and what she was thinking. Watching her on the floor, you would inch yourself away with misery and grief, because you thought, crikey, what's she doing? She's doing nothing, and she's dreadful. She's plain, and she's got spots, and where's the magic? And the magic was there the next day on film. And you just drained blood when you saw it.
So it is internal.
It's an internal thing, and this is the essence of concentration, of course. And without concentration, without the absolute tightness of concentration, here in your head, nothing works on the screen. You can walk through a part, and nearly everybody I ever see does. Sometimes there's a magical moment when you find some actor who's not walking through, and the camera picks him. But that's capricious, and so is that one. They're both capricious, the cameras. Capricious because they hate you. And you can do your nut, and they don't want to record it. But if you can establish a rapport, a love affair between yourself and the lens, and I'm flattering myself perhaps that I do, I don't know, maybe I don't, they will do everything in their power to help you. But you've got to be thinking, and you've got to know what you're thinking about. And if you go to pieces, forget it. It doesn't work.
The earlier films, there were some that were accomplished. You're famous for having shot Jack Warner.
Yes, Blue Lamp.
And then you moved to a very successful series of films, which were the Doctor films.
Mm.
When you were working in what many people might consider unremarkable cinema, were you striving to do your best within those circumstances, or were you not all that conscious that it was unremarkable cinema?
Now look here, let's get one thing absolutely straight. All I've ever been in the cinema, or in the theatre, or in my books, is an entertainer. Nothing more and nothing less. That's all I am. And anything I do to the depths of my gut. I would never, as I said, cheat anyone. I never considered those films as crappy or stupid or whatever they were. They were there to pleasure people. They were there to pleasure people who came to see us. You don't betray that faith. You don't betray people who have staggered miles in a snowstorm or something to get to the movie to see you. You do everything you can. And people met and married in movies that I made. They dated. A whole world. I have 3 or 4 generations of people that I am directly responsible to. I couldn't possibly say that I did anything more than do the best of, the best thing I could do, the highest point of my ability, and never once to look down on it. I couldn't do. And I loved the cinema too much anyway. That was another thing. It was growing. When I found that a crew was working, and that was working, and that was working, and how it worked, and this was working, the boom. Then gradually all these wonderful things came in, and I was being taken in again into a force, like I had been in the army, and producing something at the end of it. But I was very, very proud of those films. I mean, some of them were rubbish, I admit. But people like rubbish, you know. People don't want always to be educated.
Acting success and European stardom wasn't enough for Bogarde. The 70s saw him also branch out into a new career as a writer. By 1983, 3 volumes of memoirs and 2 novels had all earned rave reviews and become international bestsellers. But how he started writing was a story in itself, as he explains here to interviewer Tony Bilbo.
One day I got a fan letter, so-called, from a woman in America who'd been sitting under a hairdryer in her hairdressers in a small town in America. And she had read a magazine to pass the time, which she found rather distasteful. It was a woman's magazine, and it was an English one, and rather a cheap one. But in it, to her astonishment, she saw a picture of a house that once had belonged to her. This is a hell of a long preamble, you'll have to excuse me for that. And in front of the house, grinning like an idiot, was I, myself, there. And she didn't know who I was, because she never went to the movies, and she wasn't that kind of person. But she did recognize the house, and she saw pictures inside. So she read the rather sorry little article about me, and realized I was an actor of something. and lived in England, and lived in this house, which she'd lived in for 10 years. She'd found with her husband in 1929 and lived there until 1939 when the war broke out. They had to go back to America. So to cut a long story short, she wrote me a letter. Very pathetic, very polite, very tiny, very neat, no great deal, and sent inside a very small brown sepia picture of the house as it had been in 1929, covered in brambles and nettles. And she wrote, and simply said, it's a great impertinence to write to you. I don't know who you are, what you do, but I do know the house. Has it changed very much? And that was all. And I don't know why. I never reply to letters because it's impossible anyway. There isn't time, and I can't deal with so much. But I did write to her. I wrote to her back. We wrote to each other for the next 5 years. I think I'm right, yeah, next 5 years. She wrote in the end, towards the end, every single day of her life a letter to me, on onion skin, which if you know what that is, it's that very, very light airmail paper. I wrote 3 or 4 times a week, but when I began to put her all together and realized that she was dying, I wrote a postcard, at least a postcard, every single day until 1975 when she died. I never saw her. We never spoke. I have no idea what age she was. But she was determined that I should write. All I did glean, amongst many things, was that she was the head librarian, as far as I can put this together, and I could be inaccurate here, at a very important university in America, and that she knew a great deal about literature and about writing. And she'd seen somewhere in what I wrote to her and all the years of junk I sent her, which is only really written to try and to keep her alive, she lived alone, she was entirely alone, to keep her alive and to keep her going, to keep her strength. She thought that I could write, or should be forced to.
So would it be fair to say that if it hadn't been for her, you would never have written? I mean, not professionally.
In the final analysis, that is true, yes.
It's quite extraordinary.
Writing occupied most of Bogarde's time during the 80s, but in 1991 he was back with a new film, a French movie called Daddy Nostalgie, directed by Bertrand Tavernier. It coincided with Bogarde turning 70, a significant enough event to merit another encounter with Barry Norman.
Your first film in 12 years. Now, why? I mean, why such a long time away?
Well, I'd really got out of the habit of doing it. I hadn't, I'm often accused of, I hadn't retired, I just retreated. I don't terribly enjoy making movies. I never have.
This coming from a man who's made about 65 is a little startling.
Yeah, I know, well, there it is. I mean, now that you get to a certain age, it's a hassle, it's a drag, you know. And then I found I could write, and people bought my books, so it was easy to sit on my butt on my farm and write and do chores of the day on the land, and it was easier and it was pleasanter. And I'd done one film which I thought was a miracle film with Fassbinder called Despair. I think it's 76, you'll have to put me right, I don't remember. Yes. It was about 76. And we made it in East Germany, on the edge of East Germany, the wall and all that. It was an extraordinary experience, and wonderful and extraordinary one. We were picked for Cannes, but the film was finished about, I don't know, 7 months before Cannes. And I'd seen the rough cut and done the dubbing in Paris, and instead of just leaving it as it was, Rainer Fassbinder got bored with it and cut it to shreds over the weeks. And when I went to Cannes to see the damn film, Michael Bollhaus, who now works for Martin Scorsese in New York, Michael came up and said, "Don't come near the movie. Don't see it." And his tears are pouring out. He said, "He's absolutely ruined it." Oh. So I went to see the movie at Cannes because I had to, do my duty. And I didn't know what the film was about. Totally devastated. So I thought after that, that's it. I leave. And I left for 12 years.
So what did Bertrand Tavernier do? I mean, was it simply because it was Bertrand Tavernier that you came back?
Yeah. I'd seen nearly all the work that Bertrand had done, And he is, I always say if I'm asked, and I'm saying this to you, you haven't asked me, but I'm telling you, Visconti is, as far as I'm concerned, the emperor of the cinema. Losey is the king, but Bertrand is the genius. And he's a genius only because he absolutely knows every inch of cinema, every angle, every technical trick, but he also knows about people. And that's terribly rare, because I was brought up in a cinema when the director would say, "No, do let's hurry, darling, a little pink gin in the bar." And that was the way we made movies. To find somebody who actually really wants to scoop the yolk out of your egg and savor it is fairly exciting.
So what happened? I mean, did you put a lot into the script? There was a lot of rewriting going on, because I know you weren't happy with the script even when you agreed to do it with Tavernier, were you?
Well, there was a rewrite, which I got, and Bertrand came to London to see me, and I said I'd do it, because he was doing it. And there was a rewrite, which was still a bit cutesy pie. There were an awful lot of pussykins and daddykins.
Kind of
I'm not
man,
a daddykins type, you know. And neither was he. And we'd both been through some fairly grown-up experiences in our life, like death and life and all those things. And he just was experiencing it through the death of his father, who was dying at that point. And we kind of put it in turnaround. I must be very careful what I say here, because he let me alter my stuff and my conception of who I was, the daddy I was. And he assisted me greatly, and we wrote a lot of it together.
You know, I'd like to take a plane and go somewhere like Hong Kong, Singapore, see them for the last time.
More than Mexico?
The light in the east is... It's the colours. It doesn't matter. These legs.
I know.
I didn't want to get old.
Playing a man who was dying, and you had, I mean, you'd had a stroke, which, thank God, you appear to have recovered from fully about 4 years ago. That must have been an experience you could have used, surely. Was it the memory of that you used in playing the part? Or do you not believe in that kind of thing? I mean, how do you...
Well, I mean, you know, Barry, come on now. Every act, you know, even having a terrible row or bursting into floods of tears or whatever, there's a mirror near you, look and say, oh, that's what I look like when I do that or when that. Of course you do. You squirrel everything away for some use, some later projection of whatever you're doing. But I've been doing work classes recently in London, and a lot of the actors, young actors, they're all between sort of 18 and 25, want to know why I so mistrust the method. And my point is that I don't see any point in being shoved into a dark room for 3 months and told you've got to come out as a tin of condensed milk. Because that is not acting. It's not screen technique. It is not screen acting. You know, most people do a sort of cornflake packet performance. And what I find so exciting about working with people like Tavernier and in Europe, I haven't made a movie in English since '66.
No, I know that. Yeah.
And then they were always for foreign companies, Paramount or MGM. But they don't ask you to do the cover. They want to know, it's like an onion. They want to know, peel the skin off bit by bit and come right down to the little tiny bit in the middle, which is the heart of it. And so giving, in Daddy Nostalgie, giving Daddy a different, bad-tempered, very selfish, rather like a car salesman with the wrong kind of matching handkerchief and tie, it's not quite right. He's like a politician. But those things I found terrifically exciting, to make him, because, you know, after all, he's married to a woman who no longer speaks her language to him, or his. So they're absolutely lost. And there's nothing to talk about. And he's retired, he's dying, and they're living in this dreadful little town in the south of France. And all she's got is her bridge, and all he's got is listening to her playing bridge, you know. I mean, it could be very gloomy. I don't think it is, because a nerve is touched.
Indeed. Indeed, there is. Another nerve that perhaps you touched, I don't know whether this was inadvertent, but there is a scene in which you talk about the xenophobic middle-class Britain which your character had left. And I just wondered if that came from the heart.
Yes. It came from me, anyway.
Merci, mademoiselle. And you know, when I think that I could have ended up like those thousands of retired businessmen who live in those dreary little bungalows outside Brighton or Budley Salterton, pottering about in their rain-drenched, gnome-ridden gardens, sipping their sherry or their Horlicks, waiting for the 9 o'clock news on television, loathing all bloody foreigners, hating and mistrusting anything beyond their sceptred isle. When I think of that, it makes me really ill.
You left xenophobic middle-class Britain for the best part of 20 years. Why did you do that?
Oh, gosh, why did I do it? Well, there was no reason to stay. I mean, the last thing I did here, as I've said so many times before, the last thing I was asked to do here was a voice-over for television for the Forestry Commission.
Really?
About felling pine trees in the north of Scotland. I mean, well, if it's come to that, and I've never been asked to come back. Well, that's not quite true. David Putnam asked me to come back. But, I mean, nobody's asked me to work here. I mean, I think I'd run my limit, Barry. You know, I was in the movies I started in 47, above the title, right? I think people had got awfully used to me. And then a new group came in the beginning of the 60s, and they didn't want my kind of work or, indeed, my kind of name. They wanted the new boys, you know, the Terence Stamps, the Albert Finneys, the Tom Courtneys, and they got them, and quite rightly too. But we were pushed, we were out. And I realized that in time, the Beatles are making a new sound. The movies were becoming gritty and grainy, and a lot of people were not growing up with that fact in this country. But they were in Europe, and they'd always been that way, and that's when I went back to Europe. And
in fact, from a professional point of view, that was the best thing that could have happened to you. Oh,
gosh, the last 22 years of my life were the greatest ever. Critically. And I mean, not critically, but I mean, from the point of view of film. Oh, yeah, sure.
Because the curious thing now is that you are much more, I think revered is the word, in Europe as an actor than you are in this country.
Well, revered is a very strong word, but
yeah,
I'm better known, yes. I mean, yes, of course, I'm big fish in a very large pond in Europe. I'm a European player.
Yeah, well, yes.
But you realise that something extraordinary, I only realised coming to see you today, that all the time I've been working abroad, I've only once played an Englishman.
That is right.
They've all been Germans.
Yes. Yes, you're good as a German, yeah?
I'm very good as a German.
Born in the wrong country. I tell you what, though, I mean, for all that you were saying, you are a marvellous survivor, aren't you? I mean, it's 44 years now with the name above the title. The name is still above the title.
Oh, yes, it won't come down either.
Oh, you insist on that, don't you?
Yeah.
Why?
Because I still believe one of the earliest things I was ever told when I first joined the business in 47 was, you realise what's happened to you, don't you? This is the rank organisation. You are unknown and you are going to carry a movie. Do you understand what that means? And I didn't know what it meant. I learnt. Sure as hell I learnt. And I thought, right, if it's going to cost this to carry a movie, I'm going to do it all for the rest of my life. And I have. And I'm not going under the title. That's why I don't do those cameo parts. I mean, I'd rather write a book or review a book for a newspaper or whatever. But I won't go underneath. I still carry a movie, and I still do. Daddy Nostalgia in Italy, for example, is one of the biggest box office hits ever known there.
Is it really?
Yeah. It's made milliards, not millions, but milliards of lira. Now,
So
why? I don't know why.
Well, that's the question I was going to ask. I mean, it's marvellous that, you know, 44 years ago you started as a star, and now here you are, age 70, and many happy returns of the great day. Still a star. How have you managed that?
I think it's... I don't know, really. Learning my trade, being taught, and being very selective, and choosing the right people to teach me, and never being greedy, because I never earned what we call Kane Connery money at all. I don't denigrate either of those gentlemen. I mean, I just did not earn that kind of money. The most money I ever made in my life was on Despair. I got $200,000 for that. And that was the biggest sum of money I ever earned in one lump. I didn't want more, as long as I had a small portfolio and I knew, you know, I kept my money in an OXO tin. It practically was that. And that suited me very well. But I'd rather do the job well and have a decent job to do. I'm not interested in doing 3-day bits in, you know, a warehouse at Wapping in a cutaway coat and handmade buttons. Who cares?
Is it literally really true that you haven't been offered anything at all or anything worthwhile in the cinema in this country?
No, not entirely true. David Putnam, who I respect greatly, did ask me to do a film called The Mission. But I really couldn't get away, and I thought that I was very much too old to go clambering up and down waterfalls. I was in my mid-60s.
Which role was that? The Jeremy
Well,
Irons
it was
role?
later played by a younger man.
Yeah.
And, yes, indeed, David did ask. But no, I'm not asked.
Does that make you feel at all bitter?
No, not at all, because I don't want to work here. John Boorman, indeed, he's another one. He's asked me to work here. But I am a European, and the way we work in Europe is totally different to the way we work here.
Why then did you come back to Britain?
I came back because I was forced to come back through ill health of my partner and manager who was living out there, and he had terminal cancer, and when we knew that it was terminal, he wanted to die with his family, and that meant his immediate family and his son and his grandson, so we came back, and I just hadn't... Then I had a stroke after I'd packed up, you know, packing up something I thought I'd live in for the rest of my life in 3 weeks was quite difficult.
Do you feel you belong here now?
No.
Does that mean that you're unhappy?
No, I'm not at all unhappy. I mean, I'm back living in Chelsea, which is where I started. I'm full circle, because I started there at 16 at art school in Manresa Road. So I know everywhere there. My father was a student there. My mother was a student there too. You know, I'm back where I was. I remember Peter Jones being built.
That does go back a few years.
Yes, it goes back a few years. And I saw Judy Garland for the first time in my life at what was then called the Royal Court Cinema.
Oh, yes.
But no, I'm all right. But I mean, every morning I wake up and think, well, you're still here. I mean, that means that A, you're alive, and B, here you are.
In the end, Daddy Nostalgie was his final film. In 1992, he became Sir Dirk Bogarde, knighted for services to acting. And in 1999, at the age of 78, he died in London from a heart attack. Amongst the tributes was one describing him as Britain's first homegrown movie star. They don't make them like that anymore.